My brother stole our father's will. He waved it in my face and said, "You get nothing. It all belongs to me now." He thought I was helpless, that I would just accept being cut out of everything my father left behind. But instead of arguing, I went quiet. I smiled and nodded, hiding my rage. 3 weeks later, in court, I revealed the truth. And when my brother saw the documents I carried into that courtroom, his face turned white. What came next destroyed everything he had built on lies and greed. Before we continue, please subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments. What would you do if your own brother stole your inheritance and told you that you were getting nothing? When my father passed away, I thought grief would be the hardest part. For weeks I had dreaded the silence of the house, the emptiness of his favorite chair, the absence of his voice calling my name from down the hall. My father, Thomas Reynolds, was not just a man to me. He was the center of our family. He had been a widower since my mother died 10 years earlier. And during that time, it was me, not my brother Daniel, who stayed close. I was the one who drove him to doctor's appointments, who made sure his prescriptions were filled, who fixed his leaking pipes and shoveled his snow in the winter. I gave him my time, my money, and my strength without question. Because he was my father. Daniel? He was always too busy. Too busy with his business ventures, which usually meant gambling with investments that never paid off. Too busy with vacations, girlfriends, expensive toys. My father never said it out loud, but I could see the disappointment in his eyes whenever Daniel breezed in with empty promises to visit more often, only to vanish again as soon as he got what he wanted. Money, usually. Still, Dad believed in family. He always hoped Daniel would grow up, that one day he'd realize what mattered most. That hope died with him. And I thought the worst part would be burying him. I thought the real pain would be standing at his grave, saying goodbye to the man who had sacrificed everything to raise us after Mom's long illness drained his health and savings. I was wrong. The hardest part wasn't grief. It was betrayal. 3 days after the funeral, the lawyer called us in for the reading of the will. I had barely slept. I was still replaying my father's final moments in the hospital, his hand in mine as he whispered, "Don't worry, son. I made sure you and Daniel are taken care of. You'll both have what you need." His voice had been weak, but certain. I clung to those words like a lifeline. The lawyer, Mr. Grant, had an office that smelled faintly of dust and old leather. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with thick volumes on probate law and contracts. The blinds were half closed against the pale winter sun. My hands were clammy as I sat in one of the stiff chairs across from his desk. Daniel strolled in late, of course, wearing a tailored suit that looked out of place for the occasion, sunglasses perched casually on his head. "About time you showed up," I muttered. He smirked, sliding into the chair next to me. "Relax, brother. This is just a formality." A formality. That's what my father's final wishes were to him. Mr. Grant adjusted his glasses, shuffled some papers, and cleared his throat. His voice was dry, professional, stripped of emotion. "This is the last will and testament of Thomas Reynolds, dated 3 months ago. It states, I, Thomas Reynolds, leave all my assets, including the family home, savings accounts, and personal property, solely to my son, Daniel Reynolds." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I blinked, certain I'd misheard. "What?" Daniel leaned back in his chair, a slow grin spreading across his face. Guess Dad knew who the responsible one was. Responsible? The word nearly made me laugh. This was the same man who once borrowed $10,000 from Dad to start a company. and blew it all within 6 months on parties and a leased BMW. I looked at Mr. Grant, desperate for clarification. There must be a mistake. Dad told me himself. He wanted things to be split evenly. He said so. Grant avoided my eyes. He simply folded the paper and placed it neatly on the desk. This is the will on file with the court. Daniel turned to me, his smirk widening. He lowered his voice so only I could hear. You get nothing. It all belongs to me now. Heat rushed to my face, and my fists clenched under the table. That's not true, I whispered. Sure it is, he said, sitting back like a king surveying his kingdom. You spent all those years playing caretaker. Guess what? Caretakers don't get rewarded. They get forgotten. I was Dad's favorite. Now the house, the money, the accounts. They're all mine. Every sacrifice I had made flooded my mind. The nights I left work early to take Dad to the ER when his chest pains flared. The weekends I spent repairing the roof instead of enjoying time with friends. The thousands of dollars I quietly paid for his medications when his insurance didn't cover them. I remembered the way Dad had thanked me, calling me his rock, his steady hand. I remembered him promising, I've made sure you'll be secure when I'm gone. And now this? Everything left to Daniel? Number something was wrong. I asked to see the will. Grant hesitated, then slid it across the desk. My hands trembled as I scanned the familiar lines of text. And then I saw it, the signature at the bottom. Thomas Reynolds. But it wasn't his. I knew my father's handwriting better than anyone. The loops were off, too wide. The slant leaned differently. The flourish at the end was missing. I had dozens of his letters, birthday cards, checks he had written over the years. This was not the same hand. I looked up at Daniel. He was watching me, waiting for me to explode, waiting to see me broken. Instead, I forced my expression into calm. I set the paper down and leaned back in my chair. If that's what it says, I said evenly, then congratulations. For a second, confusion flickered in his eyes. He had been expecting outrage, a fight, maybe even tears. Instead, I gave him nothing. I stood, thanked Mr. Grant for his time, and walked out of the office. Outside, the winter air cut sharp and cold against my skin. Snow crunched under my boots as I walked to my car. My chest ached, not just with grief, but with something deeper, betrayal. At home, I sat at my dining table surrounded by the life my father had left behind. His old checkbook, letters he had written me over the years, birthday cards signed in his careful script. I laid them out next to the copy of the will Daniel had flaunted. My breath caught. The differences were glaring. This wasn't just suspicious. It was a forgery. And if Daniel thought I was going to let him get away with stealing everything my father worked for, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to fight Daniel in his world of lies and arrogance. I was going to destroy him in mine. Quietly, carefully, and with proof so strong he wouldn't see it coming until it crushed him. As I turned off the light, I opened the drawer where I kept one of Dad's old letters, his unmistakable handwriting staring back at me. It would be the first piece of evidence in the case I was about to build. That night, I barely slept. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying the moment in the lawyer's office over and over again. Daniel's smug grin, his whisper, "You get nothing. It all belongs to me now." It echoed in my ears like a curse. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Dad's face in the hospital bed, pale but steady, telling me, "You and Daniel will both be taken care of." Both, not one. Not just Daniel. Both. By the time the first pale light of dawn crept through my blinds, I had made up my mind. I couldn't just sit back and let my brother rewrite history. If he had forged Dad's will, and deep down, I knew he had, then I was going to prove it. I started small. I pulled out a folder I had kept in my desk drawer for years, old letters from Dad, birthday cards, notes he had left for me around the house, checks he had written for bills, dozens of little fragments of his handwriting collected over time. I spread them across the kitchen table, comparing them to the will I'd demanded a photocopy of before leaving Mr. Grant's office. The differences screamed at me. Dad's handwriting had always leaned to the right, with tight loops on his L and T. His signature was distinctive, a small flourish at the end of his name that never changed. But the will's signature leaned left, the loops were loose, sloppy even, and the flourish was gone. To a stranger it might pass, but not to me. The more I looked, the more my blood boiled. Daniel must have thought I wouldn't notice. He must have thought I was too grief-stricken or too naive to question it. But I had lived in the same house with Dad for years. I had watched him sign his name on everything from mortgage payments to grocery checks. That signature was as familiar to me as my own. Still, suspicion wasn't enough. I needed proof. I called Mr. Grant's office the next morning. His secretary answered, polite but distant. "Mr. Grant isn't available right now. Would you like to leave a message?" "Yes," I said, keeping my voice steady. "This is Andrew Reynolds. I need to review my father's previous will drafts. I believe there were earlier versions." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Papers shuffled. "Mr. Reynolds, I don't have any record of earlier drafts. The only will on file is the one executed 3 months ago." My stomach dropped. "Are you sure?" My father spoke to me about his will several times. He was clear, everything was to be divided evenly. "I can only tell you what's in our system," she said briskly. "Would you like to schedule a consultation with Mr. Grant?" "Yes," I said quickly. "The sooner the better." We set a meeting for later that week, but my gut told me something was already wrong. Daniel had gotten to him somehow. I couldn't prove it yet. But Mr. Grant's evasiveness, the missing drafts, it didn't sit right. That afternoon, I drove to Dad's old bank, a branch he had used for decades. I knew the manager, a man named Howard, who had always been kind to Dad and patient with me when I helped him manage his accounts. Howard looked surprised to see me, but he ushered me into his office. "Andrew, I'm sorry again about your father. He was a good man." "Thank you," I said quietly. Then I leaned forward. "Howard, I need to ask you something important. Do you remember when my father came in to update his will?" Howard frowned, adjusting his tie. "I don't recall him doing that here. We handled his accounts, of course, but wills usually went through the attorney." "Did you ever notarize anything for him?" I pressed. "Signatures, documents, anything official?" He thought for a moment, then nodded slowly. "The last time I notarized something for your dad was about a year ago. Some bank-related forms, not a will. He was very clear that his estate was to be split evenly between you and Daniel. He mentioned it in passing." My pulse quickened. "You're certain?" Howard gave me a firm nod. "Positive. He said he wanted things fair." "Fair?" The word twisted like a knife in my chest. My father had trusted fairness. Daniel had taken that trust and twisted it into theft. I left the bank with my hands shaking, a mixture of anger and determination coursing through me. Howard's memory wouldn't be enough in court, but it was a start. I needed more. That evening, I went up to the attic of Dad's house. Dust filled the air as I pulled open old boxes rifling through decades of paperwork. Tax returns, loan agreements, letters from Mom. My fingers were blackened by the time I found what I was looking for. An envelope marked in Dad's handwriting, "Estate planning keeps safe." Inside were drafts of an old will. Dated 5 years ago, they clearly divided the estate between Daniel and me, 50-50. The signatures were authentic. Dad's handwriting, Dad's flourishes, Dad's careful attention to detail. I sat on the attic floor, the papers spread out in front of me, and felt tears sting my eyes. Relief, sorrow, fury, all mixed together. Dad had wanted me included. Daniel had stolen that from me. But the real bombshell came when I looked closer at the last page. A sticky note, written in Dad's neat scrawl, still clung to the edge. It read, "Andrew, if Daniel pressures me, remind Mr. Grant that fairness must stand. This is final." My throat tightened. Dad had known. He had suspected Daniel might try something. He had left me a message, hidden in plain sight. That night, I spread everything across my kitchen table. The forged will, Dad's old drafts, the sticky note, the letters. It was damning, but I needed confirmation. Proof that no one could dismiss. The next morning, I booked an appointment with a handwriting expert in the city. When I explained what I needed, her response was calm and professional. "Bring me the documents," she said. "If there's forgery, I'll find it." For the first time since Dad's death, I felt a spark of hope. Daniel thought he had won. He thought he had erased me from my father's legacy. But he had underestimated me. And worse, he had underestimated Dad's foresight. As I left the expert's office after scheduling the review, my phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. "Don't drag this out, brother. The house is mine now. I'm moving in next week. You should come by and take anything sentimental before I change the locks." I stared at the message until my hands shook. He had no idea. No idea that his smug little empire was already starting to crack. I closed my phone and whispered to myself, "Enjoy the house while you can, Daniel. Soon, you won't just lose it. You'll lose everything." The drive to the handwriting expert's office felt longer than it was. My knuckles gripped the steering wheel until my hands ached, my thoughts bouncing between fury and anticipation. Every mile I put between myself and the house Daniel was planning to steal reminded me of what was at stake. This wasn't just money or property. It was my father's legacy, our home, our memories, everything he had worked his entire life for. The expert's office was tucked inside a modest brick building near the courthouse. The woman's name was Dr. Elaine Porter. She greeted me with the calm professionalism of someone who had seen too many family disputes tear people apart. Her office smelled faintly of coffee and printer ink, stacks of files piled neatly on her desk. "You've brought the documents?" she asked. I laid them out carefully. The so-called will Daniel had produced, the old drafts I'd found in the attic, and the letters and checks Dad had written over the years. Elaine adjusted her glasses, pulling the forged will closer. She studied the signature first, her pen tapping lightly against the desk as she traced the lines with her eyes. Within minutes, she looked up. "I'll do a full analysis, of course. But I can tell you right now, this signature is not consistent with the others. See here? Your father's natural hand tilts slightly rightward, but this one tilts left. The loops on the O and A are open when they're normally closed. The pen pressure is uneven." My chest tightened. "So you're saying—" "I'm saying someone tried to imitate his signature," she interrupted gently. "Sloppily, at that. Whoever did this wasn't trained. They rushed it." Relief and anger hit me at the same time. Relief because I wasn't crazy. My instincts had been right. Anger because Daniel had done it so carelessly, as if he believed no one would dare question him. "I'll prepare a full report." Elaine continued. It will be detailed enough to hold up in court. When you present this, it won't just be suspicion. It will be proof. Those words settled over me like armor. Proof. The one thing Daniel couldn't laugh off, couldn't brush aside with smug arrogance. I thanked her and left, my mind already racing ahead. Daniel thought he had won, but in reality, he had just walked straight into a trap of his own making. The next few days, I kept my distance from him. I didn't answer his texts, didn't respond to his calls. He grew bolder with every message. Picked up Dad's old watch today. Fits me perfectly. Having the locks changed next Monday. Come by before then if you want anything. By the way, his savings accounts have already been transferred. Don't waste your time fighting it. Each message was like gasoline poured onto a fire. He wasn't just stealing, he was flaunting it. And worse, he was spending money that wasn't his. I decided to pay a quiet visit to the house before he changed the locks. I parked a block away and walked up the street, my breath clouding in the cold evening air. The house was dark, silent. I unlocked the door with a spare key Dad had given me years ago and stepped inside. It smelled the same. Faintly of Dad's aftershave and the lemon polish he used on the wooden banister. My chest tightened at the memories pressing in from every corner. I walked through the living room, my eyes lingering on the armchair where he always sat to read the paper, on the dining table where we had eaten countless Sunday dinners. Then my eyes caught something out of place. On the coffee table lay a folder, Daniel's handwriting scrawled across the front. Property documents. I opened it carefully. Inside were printouts of bank statements, property deeds, and my stomach dropped. A draft email addressed to Mr. Grant, the lawyer. The words made my blood run cold. Please destroy any earlier versions of the will. This is the only valid one. My father confirmed it privately. He had actually put it in writing. Stupid, arrogant, careless writing. I snapped photos of every page with my phone, my hands trembling. This wasn't just forgery anymore. This was destruction of evidence, manipulation of a legal professional, outright fraud. I slipped the folder back exactly where I'd found it. Daniel couldn't know I had seen it, not yet. 2 days later, Elaine called me back. Her voice was firm, businesslike. The analysis is complete. It's forgery, without question. I'll send you the full report along with photographic comparisons and notations. I've testified in court dozens of times. This will hold. My throat tightened with gratitude. Thank you. You have no idea what this means to me. Oh, I have an idea, she said softly. Family betrayals over money are the ugliest. But people like your brother, they always leave cracks in their lies. You just have to shine a light on them. When I hung up, I felt a sense of power I hadn't felt since before Dad got sick. For the first time, I wasn't just reacting to Daniel's games. I was moving strategically, one step ahead. That weekend, Daniel called me directly. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in me wanted to hear his arrogance, to remind myself why I was fighting. Brother, he said smoothly when I picked up, hope you're not sulking too much. I'm fine, I said flatly. Good. Because I wanted to invite you over tomorrow. Housewarming dinner. Figured it'd be nice for you to see how well I'm taking care of the place now that it's mine. My jaw clenched. You're unbelievable. No, I'm successful, he corrected smugly. Dad knew I was the only one with vision. You were always just the sidekick. But hey, don't feel bad. Maybe I'll let you rent a room from me when you can't afford your own place anymore. I ended the call without another word. My hands shook with rage, but beneath the fury was something sharper. Calm determination. Let him gloat. Let him think he had won. The higher he climbed on his fragile throne, the harder his fall would be. On Monday morning, I met with my attorney, a sharp woman named Carla Hayes. She reviewed Elaine's report, the old drafts, and the photos I'd taken of Daniel's folder. By the time she finished, her eyes were hard as steel. "This is open and shut," she said. "Forgery, fraud, destruction of documents. Your brother is in serious trouble." "What's the next step?" I asked. "We file with the court. But I want to time this carefully. Let him walk into the courtroom thinking he's untouchable. Then we drop everything on him at once. Judges don't like liars, and they hate arrogance. He'll bury himself before we even say a word." For the first time since Dad's death, I felt the weight on my chest ease. Justice was no longer a dream. It was a plan. That night, Daniel texted again. "Hope you enjoyed the housewarming. Too bad you missed it. Everyone loved the renovations I'm planning. New floors, new kitchen. Dad never kept up with this place, but don't worry, I'll make it worth something." I stared at the message and almost laughed. He was planning renovations with money that wasn't his on a house that wouldn't belong to him much longer. I typed back a single reply. "Enjoy it while you can." He sent back a string of laughing emojis. He had no idea. Carla called the next morning. "Court date is set. 2 weeks from now. Get ready, Andrew. This is where the game ends." The morning after Carla called with the court date, I woke up with a strange mix of fear and anticipation burning in my chest. 2 weeks. That was all I had before Daniel would be forced to sit in front of a judge and explain himself. I had the evidence, the expert report, and the old drafts of Dad's will with his real handwriting. It was all coming together, but I also knew how slippery my brother could be. He had a way of twisting words, of making himself sound like the victim. I couldn't let myself underestimate him, not again. In the days that followed, I kept to myself. I went to work, came home, and spent hours with Carla reviewing every document, every piece of proof we had collected. She was relentless, pointing out where the handwriting analysis could make Daniel look careless, highlighting the contradictions between his supposed will and Dad's old drafts. She drilled me with questions, as if I were already on the stand, making sure I could answer with calm confidence instead of anger. "Don't give him the satisfaction of seeing you rattle," she said more than once. "Let him unravel on his own." Meanwhile, Daniel was doing everything he could to flaunt his so-called victory. Word spread quickly through the family. Cousins called me in disbelief, asking if it was true that Dad had left everything to Daniel alone. One of my uncles pulled me aside after the funeral and whispered that Daniel had been bragging openly about inheriting the house and money, saying I had been too weak to deserve any of it. I clenched my teeth and said nothing, though my blood boiled at the thought of him parading around in Dad's name like a conquering hero. One evening, I went to pick up groceries and saw Daniel leaning against his brand new car in the parking lot of a restaurant, laughing loudly with some friends. He caught sight of me and walked over, his smug smile plastered across his face. "Looks like life is finally paying me back," he said, patting the hood of the car. "Dad always said I had the drive. Guess he was right." I glanced at the car, a flashy import that screamed recklessness. "You bought this already?" I asked, my voice even. He shrugged. "Why not? It's my money now. Might as well enjoy it." I bit my tongue so hard it nearly bled. Every fiber of me wanted to shout that it wasn't his, that soon the car and the house and everything else would slip through his fingers. But I remembered Carla's words. Stay calm. Let him dig his own grave. I simply said, "Enjoy it while you can." He laughed, tossing his keys in the air. I plan to. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with Carla again. She had a file open, filled with everything we had gathered: the handwriting report, the old drafts, photos of the sticky note Dad had left, and the printouts of Daniel's email to Mr. Grant instructing him to destroy earlier versions. The evidence was damning. "This isn't just about the will anymore," she said firmly. "We're talking about fraud, document destruction, possibly even criminal charges if the judge wants to pursue it. He doesn't realize how badly he's cornered." I nodded, but doubt gnawed at me. Daniel had always been slippery. What if he found a way to spin this? What if he played the role of the grieving son, painting me as the bitter brother who couldn't accept reality? Carla seemed to read my mind. "You're not going to fight him with emotion. You're going to fight him with facts. Documents don't lie. Judges don't like games. Trust me, Andrew, when he opens his mouth in court, he'll hang himself." As the days ticked by, Daniel's arrogance only grew. He hosted a gathering at Dad's house, inviting family members and neighbors. He sent me a text with a photo of him standing in front of the fireplace, drink in hand, a crowd of people smiling behind him. The caption read, "Finally living like I deserve." I stared at the picture for a long time, my hands trembling, before quietly deleting it. Let him celebrate. The higher he climbed, the harder he would fall. 2 days before the court date, I drove past Dad's house late at night. The lights were on, music blasting inside. Through the window, I saw Daniel dancing with a glass of wine, showing off to whoever had stuck around after his little party. My heart ached at the sight of strangers laughing in the living room, where Dad had once told us bedtime stories, where Mom had decorated for Christmas, where our family had gathered around the tree year after year. That house wasn't Daniel's stage. It was Dad's legacy. And soon, I promised myself, the truth would take it back. The night before the hearing, I sat at my desk and opened one of Dad's old letters. His handwriting stared back at me, steady and familiar. I ran my finger along the words, remembering his voice as if he were speaking them out loud. He had trusted me to do the right thing, to keep fairness alive when Daniel tried to twist it. I whispered into the quiet room, "I won't let you down, Dad." Morning came quickly. Carla met me outside the courthouse, her briefcase clutched tightly in one hand. She wore a navy suit, her hair pulled back, her expression sharp with focus. "Ready?" she asked. I nodded, though my stomach churned. The courthouse loomed above us, its stone steps slick with early dew. People bustled in and out, the sound of footsteps and murmured conversations filling the cold air. As we walked up the steps, I spotted Daniel near the entrance. He was laughing with his lawyer, dressed in an expensive suit that he had no doubt bought with Dad's money. When his eyes met mine, his grin widened. He looked relaxed, confident, like a man who thought the world had already handed him victory. He leaned close to me as we passed and whispered, "Better get used to being nobody, brother. After today, you're nothing." I kept walking, saying nothing. But inside, my anger hardened into steel. We entered the courtroom, the air heavy with anticipation. The judge sat at the bench, his expression unreadable. Family members filled the seats in the back, whispers running through the rows like electricity. Daniel strutted to his place at the table, his lawyer setting down a neat stack of papers, the forged will, front and center. Carla leaned close to me. Her voice was calm, measured, but I could hear the edge of satisfaction underneath. "Let him speak first." The more he talks, the worse it will be for him. I nodded, my hands tightening around the folder in front of me. Inside it was everything. Elaine's report, Dad's old drafts, the sticky note, the emails, the truth. The bailiff called the room to order. The case was announced. The judge nodded to Daniel's lawyer. "You may proceed." Daniel stood, his voice smooth and confident. "Your Honor, this is a simple matter. My father left everything to me. My brother is bitter, but the will is clear. This house, the accounts, all of it, was meant for me." He smiled as he spoke, gesturing to the papers like they were undeniable. Family members nodded uneasily in the back. For a moment, he almost sounded convincing. I glanced at Carla. She gave me the faintest smile, then turned back to the judge. "We'll let him finish," she whispered. As Daniel continued, spinning lies with the same arrogance he had worn since the day Dad died, my heart began to pound. He thought this was his moment of triumph. He thought he had already won. But he had no idea what was waiting for him. The judge turned to our table. "And the response?" he asked. Carla rose smoothly, her voice clear and commanding. "Your Honor, we have new evidence to present. Evidence that will change everything." I watched Daniel's confident expression flicker, just slightly, at the words. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt the balance start to shift, and I knew, deep in my chest, that the game was finally about to end. The courtroom was colder than I expected. The air conditioning hummed faintly above, the smell of old paper and polished wood hanging heavy in the air. My palms were damp against the folder that held everything, the evidence that would undo my brother's lies. Family members whispered in the gallery behind me, their voices carrying an uneasy mix of curiosity and judgment. Some of them already believed Daniel's version, convinced that Dad had favored him all along. I could feel their eyes on me, measuring me, wondering if I was just a bitter son who couldn't accept being left with nothing. Daniel sat across the aisle, leaning back in his chair with that same smug grin he had worn since the reading of the will. He looked like a man who thought the game was already won, his lawyer flipping through papers with practiced ease. Every so often, Daniel glanced over at me and smirked as if to say, "Watch me win." I didn't return his look. Carla had told me not to. She had warned me 1,000 times not to give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. So I sat still, my face unreadable, my hands steady even though my stomach twisted with nerves. The judge entered, a tall man with silver hair and a grave expression. The bailiff called the room to order, and the shuffle of feet and papers went quiet. The case was announced, and the judge looked first to Daniel's lawyer. "You may proceed." Daniel stood, buttoning his suit jacket like he was addressing a crowd at a gala instead of a courtroom. "Your Honor," he began, his voice smooth, practiced, confident. "This case is straightforward. My father, Thomas Reynolds, left behind a will that clearly and unequivocally designates me as the sole heir to his estate. The house, the savings, all personal property, every bit of it was entrusted to me. My brother, Andrew, is attempting to contest this simply because he cannot accept my father's wishes." He gestured toward me with a feigned look of pity. "I understand his grief. I understand that losing a parent is difficult. But grief cannot erase the truth. The will is clear, the signature is authentic, and my father's intentions were to leave everything in my care." His lawyer slid the document onto the judge's desk as if it were a sacred text. Daniel's voice grew stronger. "I cared for my father. I was close to him, and he trusted me to manage his legacy responsibly. Andrew, unfortunately, was never suited for such responsibility. My father recognized that, and his will reflects it. The words stung, even though I knew they were lies. I clenched my hands together under the table, forcing myself to stay calm. Carla leaned closer, her voice low and steady in my ear. Let him keep talking. The more he says, the more he buries himself. Daniel went on, his tone theatrical. In the weeks before his passing, my father confided in me that he wanted everything kept simple. He wanted no disputes, no division, no complications. That is why he gave me sole inheritance. It was his way of ensuring peace in the family. Peace. The word almost made me laugh. Daniel was peace the way a wolf was safety. But the judge listened intently, his expression unreadable. Daniel closed his remarks with a flourish, spreading his arms slightly as if appealing to the entire room. This case is painful, but it should be quick. The will is valid. My father's wishes were clear. I asked that the court honor them. He sat back down, confidence radiating from him like heat. He leaned over to his lawyer, whispering something with a grin, and then glanced at me again, smugness etched into every line of his face. The judge turned to our side. Your response? Carla rose gracefully, her movements calm but deliberate. She placed a hand on the folder before her, but didn't open it yet. Her voice was even, controlled. Your Honor, my client, Andrew Reynolds, has every respect for this court and for the process of law. But the will presented by his brother is not authentic. It is a forgery. We have substantial evidence to demonstrate this and expert testimony to support it. What my client seeks is not wealth or advantage. He seeks fairness. He seeks the truth. The word hung in the air. Fairness. It was the same word my father had used countless times. I could almost hear his voice again. Daniel laughed under his breath, shaking his head like the claim was ridiculous. The judge silenced him with a sharp look. Carla continued, Before we present our evidence, I think it's important to remember that this case is not about bitterness. It is about honoring a man's true wishes, wishes that have been twisted and manipulated for personal gain. My client has endured not only the grief of losing his father, but also the betrayal of seeing his father's legacy stolen through deceit. That ends today. The judge nodded slowly. Proceed. Carla opened the folder at last. The rustle of papers seemed to echo in the silent room. She laid out the documents carefully on the table. Your Honor, here are earlier drafts of Thomas Reynolds' will, clearly dividing his estate evenly between his two sons. Here are letters, checks, and personal notes signed by him over the years. And here, she lifted the forged will, is the document submitted by Daniel Reynolds. She paused for a moment, her eyes locking on Daniel. His smug smile wavered just slightly. Carla handed the documents to the bailiff, who delivered them to the judge. We also have a full handwriting analysis conducted by a certified expert, which demonstrates that the signature on the contested will does not match the authentic handwriting of Thomas Reynolds. The differences are clear, measurable, and undeniable. The judge studied the documents, his brow furrowing. The silence in the room grew heavier. Daniel shifted in his seat, the confidence in his posture slipping, though he tried to mask it with a forced grin. Carla's voice rang steady. We request the court allow us to present the expert testimony, and that the so-called will be declared invalid due to fraud. Daniel jumped up before his lawyer could stop him. This is ridiculous. My father left everything to me. He trusted me, not him. This is just jealousy, nothing more. The judge held up a hand. You will sit down, Mr. Reynolds, and you will wait your turn to speak. Daniel sat heavily, his jaw tight, his eyes darting nervously between the judge and me. For the first time, I saw a crack in his armor. The judge turned back to Carla. You may proceed with your evidence. Carla nodded, her eyes glinting with confidence. She leaned toward me and whispered, This is it. Stay steady. He's starting to sweat. My heart pounded as the judge prepared to hear from the handwriting expert. The trap was about to close, and Daniel didn't even realize how deep in it he was already. For the first time since this nightmare began, I allowed myself the faintest smile. The walls of lies he had built around himself were beginning to crumble, and soon they would bury him completely. The judge looked up from the documents, his voice calm but firm. Call the handwriting expert to the stand. Daniel's face drained of color as Elaine Porter rose from the gallery, a stack of files in her hands. The courtroom was silent as Elaine Porter walked to the witness stand, her heels clicking softly against the floor. She carried a slim folder tucked under her arm, her posture upright, her expression calm and professional. Daniel shifted in his chair, his smirk faltering for the first time since we had walked into the courthouse. I could see his jaw tightening, his eyes darting between Elaine and the judge. He knew something was coming, but he didn't yet know how devastating it would be. The bailiff swore Elaine in, and she took her seat. Carla approached the stand, her voice steady and deliberate. Please state your name and occupation for the record. My name is Dr. Elaine Porter, she said. I am a forensic handwriting analyst with 22 years of experience. I have testified in over 100 court cases involving suspected forgery. Her credentials alone sent a ripple through the courtroom. Even some of the relatives seated in the gallery leaned forward, whispering to one another. Carla nodded. And did you recently examine documents related to the estate of Thomas Reynolds? Yes, Elaine replied. I was asked to compare several documents, including a contested will dated 3 months before his passing, as well as earlier will drafts, checks, letters, and personal notes written and signed by Mr. Reynolds. And what did you conclude? Elaine opened her folder, removing several enlarged images mounted on boards for the court to see. She held them up one by one, pointing to the details. The signature on the contested will does not match Mr. Reynolds' authentic handwriting. His true signature shows a consistent rightward slant, closed loops in the letters O and A, and a distinct flourish at the end of his last name. The signature on the contested will tilts left, the loops are open, and the flourish is absent. The pressure patterns of the pen also differ significantly. In my professional opinion, the signature on the contested will is a forgery. The words hung heavy in the air. A murmur rippled through the gallery. I caught sight of one of my uncles shaking his head in disbelief, while another relative whispered something harshly under her breath. Daniel's face reddened. He leaned toward his lawyer, whispering urgently, but Carla wasn't finished. Dr. Porter, are you certain of this conclusion? Elaine's eyes met the judge's. Yes. The differences are clear, measurable, and consistent with forgery. There is no doubt in my professional opinion. The judge nodded slowly, his expression grim. Daniel's lawyer rose, trying to regain control. Dr. Porter, isn't it possible that a person's handwriting can change due to illness, fatigue, or age? Couldn't that explain the differences? Elaine was calm, unfazed. Minor variations do occur, yes, but not fundamental differences in slant, letter formation, or pen pressure. These are not signs of aging or illness. They are signs of imitation. Whoever signed that will was not Thomas Reynolds. Gasps filled the courtroom. Daniel slammed his fist on the table, his face twisting in anger. This is a lie. She's making this up. The judge banged his gavel sharply. Mr. Reynolds, you will control yourself. But the cracks in Daniel's facade were widening. His smooth arrogance was slipping, replaced by panic and rage. I sat still, my heart pounding but my face calm. For the first time, everyone else could see what I had known all along. Daniel was a fraud. Carla wasn't finished. She asked Elaine to display the old will drafts I had found in the attic. Elaine held them up, pointing to Dad's authentic signature. These documents are consistent with his true handwriting. They also show his intention clearly, an equal division of the estate between his two sons. The judge leaned forward, examining the pages closely. Daniel's lawyer looked pale, flipping through his notes as though searching for some angle to attack. But there was nothing. The evidence was ironclad. When Elaine stepped down, Carla rose again, her voice ringing strong. Your Honor, we also have evidence that Daniel Reynolds attempted to destroy earlier versions of his father's will. We have printouts of an email draft in his handwriting instructing the attorney to discard previous documents. Combined with the forgery, this demonstrates a deliberate attempt to commit fraud. The judge took the folder, scanning the printouts. His expression darkened. Mr. Reynolds, do you deny sending these communications? Daniel stood abruptly, his voice cracking. Those aren't mine. He's framing me. My brother wants to steal everything from me because he was never good enough for Dad. The words rang false, desperate. Even the family members who had been leaning in his favor before were now staring at him with suspicion and disgust. My uncle, the same one who had once whispered to me at the funeral, shook his head slowly. My cousin muttered under his breath. Unbelievable. Daniel turned toward the gallery, his eyes wild. You all know Dad loved me more. He trusted me. He knew Andrew couldn't handle anything. But no one answered. The silence was louder than his shouts. The judge's voice cut through the air, stern and final. Enough. Sit down, Mr. Reynolds, Daniel obeyed, his hands trembling as he gripped the edge of the table. The smug smile was gone. In its place was the face of a man cornered, exposed, and powerless. Carla leaned toward me and whispered, He's finished. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to breathe deeply. My chest felt lighter, the weight that had been crushing me since the funeral lifting piece by piece. The truth was finally out in the open, undeniable, unshakable. But I knew it wasn't over yet. The judge still had to make his ruling, and Daniel wasn't going down without one last desperate attempt to claw his way out. The judge looked down at the documents before him, then back up at both sides. This court will reconvene tomorrow morning for final arguments and ruling. I want time to review the evidence thoroughly. Mr. Reynolds, he looked directly at Daniel, I strongly advise you to prepare yourself. Daniel's face drained of color. His lawyer placed a hand on his shoulder, but Daniel shrugged it off, his jaw clenched, his eyes burning with fury. He turned to glare at me as the judge adjourned the session, his voice low and venomous. This isn't over, Andrew. You think you've won, but you haven't seen what I can do. I met his gaze without flinching. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of him. He was the one who should be afraid now. As the courtroom emptied, family members avoided Daniel's eyes, their whispers circling like vultures. Some came up to me quietly, offering nods of support. Others simply looked at me with regret, as if ashamed they had believed his lies for so long. Carla gathered the files, her expression firm. Tomorrow ends it. He'll try something desperate, but it won't matter. The evidence is too strong. I nodded, my hand steady now. Tomorrow would be the day Daniel finally faced the full weight of what he had done, and I would be there to watch him fall. That night, as I locked my front door, I noticed a shadow moving at the edge of my yard. A figure lingered near my car, watching, before disappearing into the darkness. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from Daniel. You think you're safe? You're not. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying Daniel's glare in my head, the venom in his voice when he hissed that it wasn't over. My phone sat on the nightstand, the message glowing in my mind, even though I had already deleted it. You think you're safe? You're not. I had seen Daniel angry plenty of times growing up. But this was different. This wasn't just arrogance. This was desperation. He was a man cornered, and cornered men were dangerous. I woke before sunrise and made coffee, sitting in silence at the kitchen table as the sky shifted from black to gray to pale gold. My hands were steady, but my stomach churned with anticipation. Today was the day. The day my brother would finally face the truth in full. But part of me still wondered what lengths he might go to before it was all over. When I arrived at the courthouse, Carla was already there, waiting on the steps with her briefcase. She gave me a sharp nod, her eyes scanning the street. Keep your guard up, she said quietly. Men like your brother don't go down without one last fight. Inside, the air was thick with tension. The gallery was fuller than the day before. Word had spread through the family, and more relatives had come to watch. Some looked at me with quiet support, others with pity. But almost no one dared approach Daniel. He entered moments later, his suit wrinkled, his face pale. His usual swagger was gone, replaced by the twitchy movements of a man unraveling. His lawyer whispered urgently to him, but Daniel shook him off, his eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal searching for an exit. The judge entered, and the room went silent. We will hear final arguments before ruling, he said, his voice calm but heavy with authority. Daniel's lawyer rose first, his tone hurried and defensive. He spoke about grief, about the possibility of handwriting changes, about the supposed closeness between Daniel and my father. But his words rang hollow now. The evidence was too strong, and even the gallery seemed unconvinced. Murmurs of doubt rippled through the room as he finished his plea. Then it was Carla's turn. She rose slowly, every movement measured, her voice steady and commanding. Your Honor, this case is not about grief. It is not about bitterness. It is about truth. The truth is that Thomas Reynolds intended fairness. He said so to friends, to family, and in his own handwritten notes. The so-called will presented by Daniel Reynolds is a forgery, confirmed by expert analysis. This was not a mistake. This was a deliberate attempt to erase his brother, to steal his father's legacy for himself. She held up the sticky note Dad had written, her voice softening just slightly. Thomas Reynolds foresaw this possibility. He left behind this reminder in his own handwriting. Fairness must stand. This is final. Those were his words. And today, Your Honor, we ask that his final wish be honored. The judge leaned back in his chair, his eyes scanning the documents once more. Daniel shifted restlessly, sweat beading on his forehead. His lawyer whispered frantically. But Daniel suddenly stood, his voice cracking as he shouted across the courtroom. It's mine, all of it. He told me it was mine. You can't take it away from me. The judge banged his gavel sharply. Mr. Reynolds, you will sit down immediately or be held in contempt. but Daniel wasn't listening. He pointed a shaking finger at me, his face twisted with rage. He doesn't deserve anything. He was nothing. Dad knew it, and I knew it. He's trying to steal from me because he's always been jealous. The gallery gasped at his outburst. Carla stayed perfectly still, her expression calm, letting Daniel dig his own grave. The judge's eyes hardened as he turned to Daniel. "Mr. Reynolds, control yourself. This is not the place for theatrics." But Daniel's self-control was gone. His voice rose, desperate now. "Fine, maybe I signed it. Maybe I made sure it said what it should have said. But that's what Dad wanted. He just didn't have the guts to write it himself." The words hung in the air like a gunshot. The room went completely silent. His lawyer buried his face in his hands. The judge stared at him in disbelief. Family members shifted uncomfortably, some gasping, others whispering furiously. I felt my own chest tighten, not with fear, but with a grim satisfaction. Daniel had just confessed in front of everyone. The judge's voice was cold and final. "Mr. Reynolds, you have admitted to altering a legal document. That is forgery. That is fraud. This court will not tolerate such actions." He turned to the bailiff. "Take note for the record. I will also be referring this case to the district attorney for possible criminal charges." Daniel's face drained of color. He stumbled back into his chair, his mouth opening and closing like he wanted to take the words back. But it was too late. The damage was done. The judge continued, his voice firm. "The contested will is hereby declared invalid. The estate of Thomas Reynolds will revert to the last valid version, which divides his assets evenly between his two sons. Furthermore, given the fraudulent actions of Daniel Reynolds, I am placing a hold on his share of the inheritance pending criminal investigation. This court will not allow him to profit from his deceit." The gavel struck, sealing the ruling. The room erupted with whispers, gasps, and even a few quiet claps. Daniel sat frozen, his hands trembling, his face pale as ash. His lawyer tried to calm him, but Daniel shoved him away and turned to glare at me. His eyes burned with hatred, but beneath it, I saw something else. Fear. Carla placed a hand on my shoulder, her voice low. "It's over, Andrew. You won." I exhaled slowly, my body trembling with the release of weeks of tension. I looked over at Daniel one last time, his shoulders hunched, his world collapsing around him. For years he had strutted through life, convinced he could lie and cheat his way into anything he wanted. But today, the truth had caught up with him. Family members began to approach me quietly as the courtroom emptied. Some offered hugs, others apologies for ever doubting me. My uncle clasped my hand firmly and whispered, "Your father would be proud. You did right by him." I nodded, my throat tight, my eyes stinging with unspoken emotion. I had carried this weight for so long, and now it was finally gone. But as I walked out of the courthouse into the sunlight, my phone buzzed again. A new message from Daniel. "This isn't the end. You took everything from me. I'll make you regret it." I stared at the screen, my hand tightening around the phone. For a moment, I wondered just how far he would go now that he had lost everything. That evening, as I pulled into my driveway, I noticed my front door ajar, the lock splintered. Inside, the house was dark, but I could hear the faint creak of footsteps upstairs. Daniel wasn't finished yet. When I saw my front door hanging half open, the wood splintered around the lock, my blood ran cold. The last rays of daylight stretched across the driveway, but inside my house was nothing but shadows. I sat in my car for a moment, my heart pounding so loudly it drowned out every other sound. I knew instantly who it was. Daniel. He had lost in court. He had been exposed in front of everyone, Now he was desperate enough to come here, to my home. I stepped out of the car quietly, every nerve in my body alert. The air was still, the neighborhood silent. From inside came the faint creak of footsteps overhead. My stomach knotted, but my anger was stronger than my fear. This was the last line he had crossed. He had already stolen from Dad's memory, tried to erase me from his legacy, and now he thought he could break into my house as if he still had power. I pushed the door open and stepped inside, the darkness wrapping around me. The smell of overturned furniture and broken wood filled the air. My living room was a mess, drawers pulled open, papers scattered across the floor. He was looking for something, probably the documents. Proof of his failure, proof he couldn't erase. "Daniel," I shouted, my voice echoing up the staircase. "It's over. You lost. Get out of my house." For a moment, silence. Then the sound of hurried steps, heavy and uneven. He appeared at the top of the stairs, his hair disheveled, his face red, his shirt hanging loose. His eyes burned with a mixture of hatred and desperation I had never seen before. "You think you've beaten me?" He spat, his voice shaking. "You embarrassed me in front of everyone. You took everything away from me, but I won't let you win." I stood firm, my fists clenched at my sides. "You did this to yourself, Daniel. Dad gave us both everything, and you tried to steal it all. Now the truth is out. Everyone knows what you are." He staggered down the stairs, his movements jerky, unsteady. I could smell alcohol on his breath, even from where I stood. "No," he hissed. "They believe you, now. But I'll fix it. I'll destroy everything you have, and then they'll see who the real son is." His words sent a chill through me, but also a surge of clarity. This wasn't just about money anymore. Daniel had been consumed by his greed, his arrogance, until there was nothing left of him but this desperate shell of a man. He would never stop, not unless I stopped him. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911, my eyes locked on his. "You need to leave before you do something even worse. The police are on their way." His face twisted with rage, and he lunged at me, knocking the phone from my hand. It clattered across the floor, the operator's voice faintly audible as it slid under the table. Daniel's hands were on my shoulders, shoving me back, his voice hoarse with fury. "You don't get to call the shots, Andrew. You don't get to win." We struggled in the dim light, his fists swinging wildly. I shoved him back, my chest heaving, every muscle in my body tight with adrenaline. He grabbed a picture frame from the wall and hurled it at me, the glass shattering against the floor. The photo inside was one of Dad holding us as children, smiling proudly. The sight of it lying broken on the ground only fueled my anger. "This is what you've done," I shouted, my voice raw. "You've destroyed everything Dad stood for. His memory, his legacy. You trampled it for your greed." Daniel froze for a second, his chest heaving, his face contorted with rage and something deeper. Shame. But it passed quickly, replaced again by his stubborn defiance. Dad loved me more. He wanted me to have it all. You were just the helper, the weak one. I deserved it. Before he could lunge again, flashing red and blue lights filled the windows. The sound of sirens cut through the night, growing louder until they stopped right outside. Daniel's face went pale. He stumbled back, his bravado crumbling as heavy footsteps pounded up the walkway. The door burst open, officers flooding in with flashlights raised. "Police, step back!" Daniel tried to protest, his words slurred and panicked. "He's lying. He set me up. This is all his fault." But the officers weren't listening. They saw the broken door, the overturned furniture, the bruises already forming on my arms. They moved in quickly, restraining him as he shouted and fought against their grip. I stood there, breathing hard, my heart still hammering, as I watched them pull him toward the door. He twisted his head to glare at me one last time. His voice was hoarse, desperate. "This isn't over. I'll make you pay for this." But his words carried no power anymore. Not here, not now. The officers shoved him into the back of the patrol car, the door slamming shut with finality. The flashing lights faded as they drove him away, leaving my street quiet once more. I stood in the wreckage of my living room, the broken photo frame still lying on the floor. I bent down, carefully picking it up, brushing away the shards of glass. My father's smile looked back at me from beneath the cracks, steady and warm, just as it always had been. My throat tightened, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt tears well in my eyes. "I did it, Dad," I whispered softly. "I kept your word." Fairness stood. Over the next few weeks, the fallout was swift. Daniel was charged not only with forgery and fraud, but also with breaking and entering. His reputation crumbled. Family members who had once believed him now kept their distance, ashamed of how easily they had been fooled. His share of the estate was frozen, pending the criminal trial. For once, there were real consequences he couldn't buy his way out of. No lies to protect him. I moved back into Dad's house during that time, overseeing the repairs, breathing life back into the place Daniel had tried to desecrate. It wasn't just a house. It was the heart of our family. The place where Dad's spirit still lingered in every corner. Each creak of the floorboards, each memory etched into the walls, reminded me of why I had fought so hard. Family members visited, some offering apologies, others simply sitting with me in silence. My uncle came one Sunday afternoon, standing in the doorway of the living room where Dad's chair still sat. He put a hand on my shoulder. "Your father would be proud. You didn't just protect his house. You protected his honor." I nodded, unable to speak through the lump in my throat. Months later, when the criminal trial against Daniel finally concluded, the outcome was exactly what I expected. Guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to several years in prison. The sight of him being led away in handcuffs should have felt triumphant. But what I felt instead was a deep, quiet relief. It was finally over. Standing in the backyard of Dad's house one evening, I looked up at the sky as the sun dipped low, casting the world in shades of orange and gold. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. Daniel's greed had nearly destroyed everything. But in the end, justice had stood. I whispered into the breeze, a promise to the man who had taught me everything I knew about fairness and family. "I kept it safe, Dad. I made sure your words meant something." The wind stirred through the trees, and for just a moment, I swore I could feel his presence there with me. It was finally done. The fight, the betrayal, the pain, all of it had led here. Justice wasn't loud or flashy. It was steady, it was firm, and it was final. And this time, Daniel would never take it away. If you like this story, subscribe and tell us your thoughts in the comments. To hear the next one, click on the box on the left.